before kings wore crowns of gold and winds had names. There were the mountains, and the gods who grew weary of them. The world was wide and wild then, ruled by frost and silence. The gods had once walked among the lower peaks, their footsteps birthing hot springs. But as the ages passed, they retreated with the snows, climbing ever higher into the sky fangs. At last, only their garden remained, Sonderwall, clinging to the highest summit, touring at the heaven's belly, older than time, colder than the gods' mercy. Its cliffs were black and glassy, slick with frozen wind. No goat scaled them, no bird nested there, and no man dared its walls, until Uru did. They say he came from the east, seeking the gods that other men flee. His hands were raw from the climb, his lips cracked with thirst, but his eyes burned with a hunger no water could quench. When he reached the summit, the gods mocked him. What does a worm want with the sky? Uru did not kneel. Instead, he offered them the one thing their eternal existence lacked: man's worship. The gods, who had always been more cruel than kind, found this amusing, for though they had made men as they made beasts and stones without thought, without care, never before had one been so bold. And in their boredom, they accepted his bargain. They gave him a crown, not of gold or jewel, but of black star iron, heavy as sorrow. They taught him to call fire from ice, to bind the wind in chains of song, to carve warmth from the mountain's guts. And when they left, they spat upon the world, abandoning it to their new favorite children. The crown's weight bowed Uru's neck, but could not break his spirit. He descended from that sacred peak, a king. There were only the 12 tribes at first, hard men with harder lives who scratched existence from frozen cliffs and snow-choked passes. Their chieftains wore necklaces of wolf teeth and swore by no gods but hunger and cold. Uru, the godsworn, could have broken them with fire. Instead, he offered them something more terrible, a chance to prove their worth. With magic, he carved the steps of bond into Sonderwall's face. 1,000 stairs winding up the black glass cliffs, each step slick with ice and promise. Every chieftain was summoned to climb and speak their truth. Some cowered, many fell. Their bones still whisper in the mountain winds, warning those who would listen. Those who reached the summit emerged changed, their beards frosted with rime, their fingers blackened by cold, their eyes burning with the same fire that had driven Uru. No oaths were sworn that day. None were needed. The shared ordeal bound them tighter than any vow. Thus were born the founding lords, their hands forever calloused from clinging to that sacred rock. The lowlands laughed when they heard of the Sky Kingdom. No crops grow on stone, sneered the grass lords. No cities cling to clouds, mocked the river princes. Uru answered by doing what no lowlander could imagine. His people learned to whisper to the wind, coaxing warmth from its cruel breath. They delved deep into the mountain's guts, finding fires that never died. Their stonemasons carved fortresses that bloomed from cliff faces like stone flowers. Their bridges spanned gaps so wide hawks turned back in fear, and their messengers rode the skies on kites of silk and bone. When the lowland kings sent armies to crush this insolence, the mountains themselves rose in defense. Avalanches came without snow or warning, swallowing entire legions. Men whispered that the Uru could command the very stone. They were wrong. The mountains needed no commands, they remembered their children. The Uru did not conquer. They simply opened their gates and let the world come to them. Salt and shelter they offered, and one promise above all: any man may rise if he can endure the climb. As centuries turned, the empire grew like ice forming on a lake, slowly, inexorably, until all beneath its surface was changed. Valley lords swore fealty for a taste of Uru silver. Merchant princes begged for the secrets of wind magic. The white flame priests anointed each new emperor with oil that smelled of blood, declaring his breath warmed by dying stars. In time, the empire commanded not just their mountains, but all lands where their meltwater flowed. From the great glaciers to the emerald sands, every stream paid tribute to the peaks. The sky throne stood eternal, that same black slab where gods had last touched earth. But power is a wine that intoxicates before it poisons, and the taste of it lingers long after the cup is dry. For 1,000 years the emperors of the Skyfangs were not born, they were forged. Each heir had to climb the steps of Bond barefoot in winter, had to stand naked before the Black Throne and let the mountain winds judge their worth. A dynasty of will and frost, bound by ordeal, not by blood. Until the usurper came. He took Uru's name like a thief slipping on a dead man's boots. He wore the star-iron crown, but his hands had never bled upon the sacred rock. And when the priests spoke of the old ways of trials and tests, he laughed and gave his command. Tear them down. The steps of Bond, carved by the first emperor, were shattered stone by stone. No more would men rise by merit, no more would the unworthy fall. The usurper decreed his son would rule after him, and his son's son after that, a line of soft-handed kings who would never know the mountain's bite. The white flame priests whispered that the gods would punish such arrogance. The gods did nothing, and that was the greatest warning of all. At first it was just another jewel in the knight's crown, a wandering star the stargazers named the tear of the goddess, for it burned with a green fire that made emeralds weep with envy. For 3 turns of the moon it danced across the heavens, and wise women whispered that it marked the gods' favor. They were wrong. On the eve of reaping, when every hearth blazed bright with the year's last bounty and the wine flowed as freely as water, the star fell. Some say it screamed like a dying giant as it tore through the sky. Others swear the heavens held their breath, and the scream came from the earth itself, when the burning spear of heaven shattered the world. The crystal domes exploded into knives of glass that rained down upon the cities. The great spires of Sunderwall melted like wax, their molten stone flowing like tears down the mountainside. A wind hotter than hell's own breath scoured the land, leaving fields blackened and rivers steaming. For 100 leagues in every direction the earth coughed up smoke and saltless fire, as if the very bones of the world had been set alight. When the dust cleared, the sky throne stood empty. Some claim they saw the last emperor plucked from his seat by the star's fiery breath, his crown melting as he tumbled into the abyss. Others whisper that he simply stepped off the edge when he saw what was coming, choosing the void over bearing witness to the end. The sun hid its face for a year and a day after. When it finally returned, it shone upon an empire already tearing itself apart. 4 kings rising from the ashes, each clutching a piece of the broken crown, each blind to the true doom that still slithered beneath their feet. For gods remember, and their vengeance is patient. When the emperor fell, the empire shattered like glass upon stone. Brother turned on brother with knives still slick from the harvest feasts. Queens raised their banners against their own blood, stitching them with the names of the betrayed. The great golden roads, once trod by envoys and merchants, ran thick with crimson. Thus began the war without end, where every victory birthed fresh betrayals, and oaths dissolved like salt in the sea. From the corpse of Uru rose 4 kingdoms, each a grotesque reflection of the empire's glory. Theris, the Iron Kingdom, clawed itself from the ashes of the western forges. There kings wore crowns of black steel and hid their faces behind masks of eternal mourning, for they had seen what became of men who ruled without fear. Their laws were written in iron, as it was their justice. To the south festered Braille, the Rose Court, where beauty was a blade honed to a killing edge. Poets duelled with poisonous blades, and every throne rested on the bones of 100 lovers. The Brillians painted their lips with venom, and their eyelids with ground pearl, so they might weep diamonds when the occasion demanded. In the mountains clung Duga, the stone crown, where the line of rulers never truly died. When an empress grew too old or too wise, they sealed her living in the sacred caverns, her body left to merge with the roots of the earth. Some say their whispers still coil through the stone, guiding their descendants' hands in war and statecraft alike. And last, slithering through the river deltas, came Salavan, the river rain. Its lords bore their lineage in watermarks upon their skin, swirling patterns that darkened when the floods came. They waged war without armies, sending pestilence ahead like envoys, their enemies choking on their own swollen tongues before ever seeing a sword raised. Their children were born with webbed fingers and eyes like still ponds, seeing much and saying less. For a time these kingdoms thrived, drunk on their own cruelty, until the Iron Men came. The reckoning came not with rebellion, but with perfect obedience. From those soulless children who had labored without complaint through the Empire's golden age, faceless, forgotten slaves who had swung the hammers and dug the mines. The rulers of the four realms died as they had lived, in fire, in poison, in stone, and in water. And when the last screaming human had been silenced, the Iron Men returned to their posts, standing vigil over a kingdom of corpses, its throne occupied by a golden mask that never spoke. In the dark places where the roots grow deep, they wait still. Beneath their black fortress, their blades unsheathed, their eyes unblinking, with the terrible patience of tools that have outlived their makers. But in the shadow of the four kingdoms a fifth ember smoldered, unnoticed, alive. Deep in the Empire's ruined heart, where fields once golden with wheat now sprouted only poison, the forgotten gathered. They were the scorched, the blinded, those who had stared too long at the falling star and been cursed with visions in place of sight. They whispered of a shard of the sky throne salvaged from the flames, not to reclaim power, but to remember what had been lost. The land itself conspired to hide them. The star's strike had gouged the earth into a weeping wound, and over time the waters came, slow, silent, seeping up through cracks in the world's foundation. The poison plains became fens, then swamps, then a labyrinth of black water and grasping roots. The survivors learned to build on stilts, to navigate by the whispers of the fog, to harvest what grew where the star's flesh had seeped into the waters. Thus did Boga rise, not as a kingdom, but as a secret, a cursed safe haven, a realm of silt-thrown monarchs and reed-crowned mystics, seeing paths others could not. The Iron Men never came for them. Perhaps they did not know. Perhaps they did not care. Or maybe they feared what grew in those waters, the thing that hums beneath the bog, beneath the falling skies.